We're learning more about the deadly dust explosion at a Fremont wood pellet manufacturing facility last summer. An OSHA citation says a wood grinder, hammer mill, surge mixer, and bucket elevator were all operated at Horizon Biofuels without safety controls to prevent the hot equipment surfaces. According to the report, the parts could become hot enough to ignite the wood dust, potentially causing an explosion. In July of last year, 32-year-old Dylan Danielson and his two young daughters, ages 8 and 12, died in this explosion at Horizon Biofuels. In early February of this year, OSHA cited the company for a number of violations, including combustible dust buildup. Weeks later, we learned the mother of one of the girls killed in the blast filed a lawsuit against Horizon Biofuels.
President Trump